Awesome. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Canadian Professional Sales Association and our accredited partner, Agnes Lan of Change Connect. My name is Rupalin, and I will be moderating this session. Today's webinar will cover building a powerful sales compensation plan, and we'll hear from Agnes on organizational goal and sales compensation alignment, preparing for sales compensation plan design, unique considerations for different sales roles, and best practices for compensation plan communication. Your host today is Agnes Lan, VP of Business Development at Change Connect, offering customized solutions for small to mid-sized businesses with a focus on sales transformation to help them work more efficiently and effectively. They help businesses reconfigure their sales compensation structures to align with company objectives, implement sales training programs, revamp sales hiring processes, and provide scalable change management for specific sales needs. Now for just some quick housekeeping rules for today. Please note that all of our attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of the workshop, and that you can ask any questions or even make comments using the questions function of your GoToWebinar dashboard. They'll just be addressed in the Q&A session at the very end here. This webinar will be recorded, and the material referenced in today's session will be available afterwards. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Agnes to start. Thanks so much, Agnes.
No, thanks so much, Rupalin. And nice to meet you guys. We actually have a pretty decent turnout today. I assume it's because of the red hot market in the sales recruitment market right now. So, and everyone talking about how can we keep our sales rep motivated in the best way possible. And of course, sales compensation is a big part of that. So without further ado, let's start. Ms. Agnes, why is this lady running in the middle of winter? What does that have to do with sales compensation? So when I saw this picture popped up a few days ago, I'm like, I have to take it as a talking point in today's conversation, because a lot of times when we look at sales compensation, we're looking at, oh, how do we pay out our people? How do we get compensated? It's all about the payment part of doing the job, and not really about everything else of the why. Everything is about the how of the sales compensation plan, but not the why of the sales compensation plan. And you think about this lady running in the winter, she looks like she's smiling. A big part of it is the motivation of getting the extra step in or not. And that's really when it boils down to a powerful sales compensation plan. It has to be connected with everything else within the organization, getting from that point A to that point B. But at the end of the day, is getting that rep to make that extra call, take that extra step to bring your company to the next level. My name is Agnes Lan. I'm the head of sales here at Change Connect. Imagine, being the head of sales in a sales consultancy. It's quite the pressure because everyone around me has everything to say about how they can bring on a better sales organization when these consultants do sales improvement for a living. So it's fantastic to have a group of experts in sales talking to me about sales all day, every day. Change Connect is a credit partner of CPSA for sure, but also we are a sales consultancy. We do anything and all things that have to do with sales, sales compensation, obviously from today's conversation, but strategy sessions, sales training, CRM implementation, sales stack planning, sales journey mapping, putting together a sales playbook, pretty much anything and all things that have to do with sales we do. Anything that outside of the sales we try not to do. So today's goal, like Ripon says, so there's a few things that we want to talk about today. Number one, organization's goal in terms of alignment. Number two, compensation plan and the steps associated. A few, tidbits in terms of unique consideration that we have seen in the past that I want to share with you. And last but not least, just some best practice around communicating the actual plan to the gang. And I'm going to start off with some pet peeve of mine, some costly sales mistake, because I want you to focus on that. Think about whether you guys are doing it within your sales organization, but also as I go about talking about the various different points today, I want you to map back to this. It's like, are we making this mistake? What are we doing? And how can we now leverage our sales compensation to get us as an organization to the next level? First of all, my number one pet peeve is recycling the same plan over and over again. It's the same as setting your revenue goal, right? 20% from last year, year over year, that's what I want. But how? What are we talking about? Why 20? Why not 30? Why not 10? Is there insights? What is the plan in doing that? Same as sales compensation plan, right? Well, it worked last year, so I'm going to choose same plan, recycle over and over. But your strategy changed, the people changed, your role might have changed, the market might have changed. Recycling the same plan may or may not get you the same result, even if you're happy with last year's result or the year's result. First of all, number one. Number two is fail to benchmark the industry. A lot of times you do your own thing and then, you know, you let the industry sort of take over. A lot of time, especially with today's world, what we've been doing with a lot of clients is if you think about the hybrid sales model right now, since COVID, you're really looking at a different way of selling. And when you're looking at a different way of selling, you're changing the salespeople's job role on a day-to-day basis. So you can't really, you first of all, you have your own methodology and your way of going to market, but also how close are you to industry data? Is your industry changing and you haven't changed your compensation, right? So you're going to lose people left, right, and center if you're not going to benchmark against industry data. Third pet peeve of mine is driving the wrong sales behavior. A lot of times, like I said, when you look at sales compensation, you're looking at a path to an end game, right? So we're not compensating the folks for the sake of compensating the folks, right? If that's the case, then it's like paying out an accountant. I wouldn't have to have a session today on sales compensation, right? So you have to map your compensation to the desired behavior, and of course, and then we'll talk about later on today also to the organization's goal. So where is the alignment, right? Making sure that the way they're compensated allows them to behave to exhibit the behavior you want for your team. The fourth piece is overcomplicating commission plan. That this one is an important one because now as we talk about changing behavior and making sure that people are compensated based on the desired behavior, then all these over engineer comp plan comes along. So, oh, if this and this and then the problem with overcomplicating comp plans is the issue that is hard to execute, right? And then I get a lot of questions. Well, what tools? Sure, absolutely can use tools to streamline some of that, but complicating the comp plan also allows for misunderstanding and there's a lack of transparency. So if there's a misunderstanding, then we have an issue at payout, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. Is how can it make it as transparent as possible so that you drive the behavior in a way that makes sense. Fifth point there is cookie cutter approach. Oh, if so and so did it this way, I'm going to do it this way too. But no two teams are alike. No two product is exactly alike. So what is that cookie cutter incentive? It may or may not work as well on your side of your team. Even within the same organization, I see certain teams do certain incentive, and it may not worth be as effective in other teams, depending on the job role and the personality within that type in there. Last but not least, having a very manual process. A lot of times, like I am talking to this company in the States right now where they're like, okay, you know what, we know we just got an injection of fund, we're gonna exponentially grow our sales team to from I think 15 to 100. And they're trying to get ahead of that in the comp plan and figuring out now everything is manual, including time cards. They're like, how can we now change this part of it so it's less manual? So we're looking at different tools and apps that we can use for payout and calculation of payout and showing transparency. So there's a few things at play here. So keep this in the back of your mind. If you fall into any of this, then we have some room for discussion today. First things first is the idea of the why. What's the objective? Right? What is your objective with your team, with your organization, and what does your current sales compensation plan align with your objective? Right? So don't look at the compensation plan in silo. How do I pay my people? That's not the question, right? The question is how how are we going to pay our people? But what is the objective of the organization? Trigger down to what is the objective of this particular role, and there's also some science in organizational design to drive the right behavior, and then moving to how can I compensate my people so that they exhibit the behavior that I want for the department and the departmental goal, but ultimately reaching my organizational goal. But why does that matter? Why have we been spending 60 minutes on this today? Number one, you want to make sure you set expectation and standard and specify the company's goal. Okay, a lot of times when we talk about comp, we say, okay, well, OTE is this. I want your personal target to be this. This is what I want you to hit per quarter. This is the new account I want you to bring in. Sort of, this is the split, right? It's very micro when we talk about it. But I also want you to bring it to a macro. This is how ultimately what you do here affect the rest of the organization, right? Because they need to see that they matter. Like when you break down salespeople, some people love dealing with salespeople, some people hate dealing with salespeople. But when you're looking at it, right? If you're looking at it, you have these really high performing individual that are articulate and that is very goal oriented. And when you think about that, they matter. Sure, their personal goal matter, but how that fit into the greater, grander scheme of things matters to them as well. So you want to make sure that you present both sides of the coin to them, and you want to also delineate the different levels, right? And I don't mean by right now because of the need to always be moving up to a next level every 9 months. We've now broke down these roles into like 3 sub roles with it. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about having a clear objective and career objective for people to climb up a ladder, right? If you are, and especially in the world of sales, we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of hunter and farmers. But if you think about the hunter's personality, what is my hunter's personality's career path? And what is my farmer's personality career path? What does that look like, right? And understanding that there is a way forward in the organization. But why it all matters is because sales comp, because these people are highly functional, they are very transparent, they are very self-motivated. Therefore, you need, and to be fair, if you're in sales, it's because there's a big part of compensation. That's a big piece of your role. So how are you going to use compensation as a motivator to align what you want to what you want to see the outcome of behavior? So it is think of sales comp as a motivational tool. In other department, it's not as apparent. Like if you think about the accounting department, for example, a payout is a payout, right? You get the 40, 50, 70, whatever annual salary, and that's it. That's sort of sure. It is there. You have to compensate people for doing doing their job. So it is a base salary. But in the world of sales, it motivates every action that they do, right? We're going to talk a little bit about spiff later on too. So keep that in mind. But how do you motivate people? Always keep that in mind. How do you use comp to motivate people to take that extra step in the winter, right? The lady I had in before. I want you to also keep focused. I saw this quote, and I want to make sure we talk a little bit about it. Compensation should never drive the strategy. It needs to be the other way around. And a lot of times, because we're so used to taking last year's comp plan or keeping things the way it is, or taking my competitor's comp plan, you will let the compensation drive your ceiling, drive your strategy. But if you take a moment and your annual business planning session to look at, okay, what is the strategy? And if you don't mind blowing up your sales compensation plan and say, okay, what is it that I need to do? How am I going to structure my sales compensation in such a way that allows the people to see a clear path to the strategy that I just built, right? and make sure that strategy is what's driving the compensation, not the other way around. I think that's an important one for you guys to think about as you revamp your comp plan in this future. As I guess how do you go about doing it, right? Comp plan goals. Number two, I talked about organizational goal earlier, right? What is it that we want to do as an organization? Then I want to look at, okay, what is it that we want to do in terms of the primary goal for your department, right? What is it that we're trying to do? So primary goal can be anything like I want to grow revenue. I want to increase average contract length. I want to increase repeat customer. I want to increase retention rate, right? Those are very specific primary goals that you might have, and then you'll be able to structure your goal differently, or your plan differently. I'll give you an example after I go through the secondary goals. And your secondary goal might be to drive sales in a specific product, right? There's a particular new product you want to drive. You see what that is. You want to attract specific customers or client. Maybe you want to reduce discounting, right? And or drive margin. And all that have everything to do with sample plans. So, talking to our HubSpot reps, we're also a HubSpot partner as well. Anyone using HubSpot needs help, let us know. But talking to some of our HubSpot partners, and it's interesting to see their growth too, because in the beginning of time, it's all about bringing new sales, and then they realize that there is, as with all SaaS tools, there's an issue with stickiness. So after 3 months of subscribing, people would drop like flies, right? So one of their first compensation goal change or comp plan change is that they only get paid out if the company or the client stays with them for longer than 6 months. That was one of their first change that they did to combat that. Because if you think any smart salesperson, right? If you think about it, I only get comp if someone stay for 6 months. Okay, I'm going to qualify my client a little differently, right? So they will work backwards to exhibit and give you what you need. But you gotta figure out where the levers are in terms of your sales comp that allows them to think a little differently. I'm not just grabbing everyone and their uncle and signing them up and, well, hopefully they stay, right? I'm already qualifying for company and I'm selling them a little differently too, right? It's not the soul that I want. It's the fact that I want them to stay for more than 6 months. And then there's a stickiness in place. And obviously, once they use a CRM for 6 months, then, everything it's done. The process is there, everything is good. So there's a little bit of that to play out with as well. And discounting and or the driving of margins. So if you want your sales team, sales ops teams, and operations team to work collectively more as a whole, I've seen comp plan where the commission is paid out on the revenue, but I've also seen comp plan where the revenues paid out on the margin, right? On the net profit. So, if you get, I've seen margin as well. If this job have this margin, then you get paid out this amount, this margin, this amount, or you just get paid out on net altogether. So, but that allows them to exhibit behavior and work together with your ops team to ensure that they bring in good customer that's not going to drive margin down to paper thin, right? But everything has to do with your goal. What is your goal for the year, right? Going back to what HubSpot did earlier with the average length, right? It wasn't there before. They look at the data from last year. They change their comp plan next year to combat some of the issues that they have in sales. So I want you to always keep in mind that sales comp isn't a stagnant thing, right? It is something that you can move forward. Agnes, sometimes you're like, well, I want to make sure that our base is there, but is there something else that we can do? Sure, right? Let's say you want to put a tiger team together to ensure that you get the top 3 account in each of your verticals. You want to win those at all costs, right? I don't care if it's heavy discounting. I just want that logo on our client list, right? You put these tiger team together, and if you get those, then perhaps they get a spiff, right? A weekend ad. I've seen some crazy spiffs, but like a weekend in Vegas, with an exotic car, or these incentive plans are crazy. But likewise, that's what salespeople like, right? Everybody talks about sales incentive trips, right? Because that shows the rest of the sales community that you made it. You were one of those that went top 10, top 5, top 1% that get the sales incentive trip, and hence you're looked at differently, right? Let's be honest, most of our salespeople have an ego, but that's what you have to use to drive their sales. I'm a salesperson. I can talk badly about them. 7 compensation type, and that's obviously more. Oh, actually, I end up putting 8. But whether the salary, stock, commission, bonuses, awards, perks, products, incentive trip. The reason I put it this way is a lot of times when we talk about sales comp, people just think salary plus commission, or salary plus commission. But it's not just base plus commission, right? There's a lot to go into the compensation of a salesperson. Like, I'll give you an example of bonuses. I have a client where they're an engineering consulting firm, and they are a very it's a very harmonious team. They don't promote or prefer to promote individualism. So they don't want, when we talk about coming up with a commission plan for them, it wasn't about commission. It wasn't about you drive this and you drive this sale and then hence you get this commission. It was never about that. It was always about, okay, let's come up with a team bonus. Again, the team need to reach this new height. The team need to reach extra $1 million in existing client new sales. Team needs to go to get net new. What does that look like? And then what does a quarterly bonus look like based on the team achieving? It's always a team achieving. And hence, when you look at those team bonuses or individual bonuses, it also is a way to drive culture, right? It really is the goal of the organization, but also the cultural organization that actually comes down to exactly how are we going to motivate our people and what kind of behavior are we trying to get them to exhibit based on that. But like I said, your salespeople are going to be the type A personality. In hand, don't forget the awards, the recognition. They care about that a lot. So make sure that's also in there as well. And perks and product flex hour. There's just so much involved in compensation that you really have to understand the role and the people that you're trying to motivate to get to the right motivator. Right? It's not compliment, motivator. Constructing the plan is I would say an easy 5-step process. Every step equally as I think there's a lot involved. It's easy 5-step, but there's quite a bit of thought involved in getting it to an optimal motivation method. So if you look at step 1, it's about the objective and value of the organization. What is it that we're trying to achieve here? Then you look at what you want to achieve, and then you look at, okay, what are the behaviors I want them to exhibit to get to the objective that I want to achieve? So you work backwards and figure the behavior. And then based on the behavior, I want you to look at, okay, what am I doing from, I have all these things at my disposal, right? I have bonuses, I have flex days, I have trips, I have base, I have days off, I have, products, free products, whatever, right? Golf days. You have all these things at your disposal. How am I going to use these levers to get to how I want them to exhibit the behavior? Okay, hand in hand, figuring that out. Then here's the interesting part because we always end at, oh, this is a compound, great. People don't think about, okay, how do I administer this process? And that's when it gets overcomplicated because you come up with all these wonderful compensation plans to get to exhibit the behavior without really thinking about the administrative part. So always I'll think about the administrative part. Check in with your finance, check in with your payroll to make sure that, it's not going to be easy to execute, but it shouldn't be 30 days of running report to get to what is the commission structure. So how do you administer this? And last but not least, now you need to reflect back into a dashboard. I don't care if you use Verison, I don't care if you use IQ, I don't care what dashboard. You can use Salesforce for all I care, right? But now if you want the behavior to be exhibited and they can make a direct parallel with your compensation plan and the behavior, then the last piece of it is a reinforcement piece. If you think about the change management methodology, you need to be able to show the rep a dashboard that keeps them motivated the entire year through, because they're looking at the dashboard and they're looking at the compensation plan, and then they're looking at how do you egg them on to do better in what they do. So these last two pieces I find is not as I guess people don't think about that as much as they're when they're doing design plan. They always think about the front three things or even the second and third piece, but not the actual display or the dashboard piece. So do take in extra consideration in that last piece there as well. Various different metrics. A lot of metrics is same as you would put on your KPI for your salespeople, right? So leads by source, close opportunity conversion ratio, maybe your open cases, open activity. How are they going to see a direct correlation between how they're measured to the payout? Don't forget, when you're looking at, and we talked about a lot about revenue and bringing things in, but sales manager also have to live up to these metrics as well. So how are the sales rep compensated, and then how is the sales manager compensated, and starting to really delineate the payout between the various different roles, because you need different type of personality and different type of behavior exhibited in order for the organization to run function properly. So everyone should have, to a certain degree, a different type of compensation plan that allows for that person to do well in that role. So far, so good. Representative questions I can take right now before I move on to the next section.
Nothing so far, Agnes, but again, please feel free to put those questions into the question function and we can get to them as the webinar goes on.
So next section is about all the unique considerations. So first things first, different roles in the organization drive different behavior that meet one goal. Okay, make sense? You're not gonna pay your hunters the same way that you pay your farmers. It's the same way that you pay your sales ops coordinator. It's and a sales manager. It just isn't. And we get into these conversations with leaders about, well, I want to be fair, right? I want to be fair. So, and yes, absolutely, equal pay, fairness, I agree with that completely. But fair doesn't mean same. I think, and that's where I'm trying to, when I have conversation with leaders, and we get into these heated arguments about fair. Fair, I think what you guys have to understand, fair doesn't equal same. And I think that will allow you to have a breakthrough with some sales comp decisions. Various different things to consider, right? In terms of, the base compensation versus variable compensation, maybe the difficulty of sales, level of autonomy, the necessary experience, your own contribution to sales, and the company's culture. And I'm gonna flag the own contribution to sales. A lot of times when I look at base plus commission, I always look at, well, how much base should this offset? How much of it the OTE should be base versus commission versus bonus, and what does that look like? And a big part of the conversation I have with leaders is around, well, how much of this deal being closed is within their control, right? We always get into these wonderful conversations about inside sales reps, because if you run inside sales rep, you bring the leads in, but it's, yeah, if they can qualify better and hence they have a better chance of closing, absolutely, right? But their job is to bring in as many leads in as sales qualified leads in as possible. So when you look at that, they cannot close on their own, right? So when you look at that, and when you look at the comp of an inside sales rep, then it cannot be heavily commissioned, because much of the sales being closed is not in their control, right? So we always look at finding a balance between what is within their control, right? Variable compensation, we always talk about the complexity of a sales cycle, right? How long, how big, how fast, how complex, how many decision makers, all that have everything to do with how do you compensate your people. You want to talk about how much a rep is able to influence a purchasing decision. You want to talk about the selling function itself, right? Do I need to bring in them, before back in the day, nowadays less, but there's a technical expert in the house that would help you do co-selling as well. How are you going to compensate that engineer and salesperson to come in and help you sell your piece? So what does that look like? We always talk about accelerator versus decelerator as well, right? You hit over your target. I don't want my lady in the winter to stop running just because they got to the first hut. I want her to keep going, right? So what does an accelerator look like? But what if she didn't never made it to her first hut in the first place? What does that look like in terms of decelerator to make sure that they are constantly moving? Remember, I told you that one extra step. Always think, how can I make my people to make that one extra step, one extra call, one extra something, right, to move forward? You don't want them to meet their target and sandbag and wait for next quarter either, right? So what are we doing to make sure that doesn't happen? And obviously on margin as well, if we're talking about a lot of discounting. Always go back to my hunter and farmer scenario, right? If you're paying your hunter and your farmer in exactly the same way, then somewhere in the process, somewhere in your organization, something isn't quite efficient. Because hunter, they are different beasts than farmer. They get high on different things. So if I'm feeding them the same thing, then it's not the most optimal to get individual hunters and individual farmers to achieve at their highest level. Last but not least, last part, now that we have a sales comp, what are we going to do in terms of communicating the sales comp plan? First things first, like I mentioned before, the worst thing that happened is miscommunication of a comp plan. The comp plan is supposed to motivate people. If there's unclear or unclear messaging, if there is not communicated at all, if it's too convoluted for people to understand, it won't serve as a motivator. So it's important to communicate the comp plan clearly, right? And whether that is in an annual sales kickoff and a sales meeting, one-on-one, ensure that there's no ambiguity, there's no guessing involved. They know how they're making their money. Ensure that the leader, the sales leader that's communicating this message is trained, right? Make sure they understand. Sometimes I see my leader trying to communicate, and they're like, well, reps like, well, what if I did this and this? And they're like, well, hold on, I don't know, right? And I'm not saying they have to know all the answers because the reps are very quick on their feet. They know exactly what they're doing because that's a livelihood, right? So, but the leader has to be trained to communicate a plan in the most effective manner possible so there's less ambiguity. Include example in the calculation in the presentation deck because it allows people to see clearly how they're going to make their dollar. I'm going to suggest FAQ. Our HR suggested FAQ, but I know it's not often that people do FAQ for sales comps. So make sure that there is a way, a platform to address any questions, and make sure it's on paper. I find this very important. Is tracked because even when two people talk, even if they at the best of times, there's going to be some misunderstanding. When it comes to sales comp, the problem balloons down the road when they're getting paid out. So ensure that things are tracked and in email so that people can reference afterwards. Agnes, I have all these plans. How I want to execute them. There are some tech that you can use to run this. Exactly is obviously a good platform. Exactly and Verison is the industry leader in this area, but for sure there are quite a bit of others. Captivate is up there. So a lot of ways to track your compensation and provide the transparency that salespeople need to understand their payout. There should be no reason in this day and age, to be doing sales comp on a spreadsheet. Okay, it just you're asking for reps to come back and dispute the payout, and there should be no reason for that. Going back to my original piece, right? These are my pet peeves. So what I'm trying to do is say there's a few things for you to consider. Now let's turn my pet peeve into things that's actionable. Number one, we want to make sure we're using data to drive strategic planning. What is it that we're trying to achieve? What's the data that backs it? What are we trying to get to this year? So it's a very data-driven model. It isn't so much, well, let's take last year's and then slap on another 20. That's not how it works. Number two, you want to benchmark to some creative competitive incentives, right? You want to make sure that you know what's going on in the marketplace as well. And what I've been doing with some of our clients, not only am I benchmarking against your competitor, I'm also benchmarking them against the latest SaaS firm at the moment because of the hybrid model. We're really moving toward a hybrid way of selling, which is a bit more like a SaaS sales model. So I'm also trying to do that as well. That allows for just understanding of what else is out there and having good discussion around how to drive behavior to exhibit the behavior we want them to drive, right? Third piece is align your incentive with goal, which is what I've been saying all day. Don't look at the how to incentive as a standalone exercise. Really look at it as a fallout of your annual strategic plan, and now look at the how as a way to get to a goal that was predetermined as a company objective. Fourth is make it simple. Really, I'm telling you, there's no reason for elaborate plans. There's a reason for making sure everyone's plan is slightly different based on their, not everyone, but every job role has a slightly different plan. But there should be no reason why it needs to be complicated, right? On this dollar amount is this, on this dollar amount is this, on this dollar amount is this. Well, and if this client goes away from us, in a year, then nothing, no one, everyone gets called back. Well, how do you execute that, right? So keep it simple, make sure that everything is easy and transparent. Tailor incentives for the different roles. I tell you, hunter and farmer should be compensated differently. They exhibit different behavior. You expect them to be incentivized on different things, and hence, they need to be paid out a little differently. Automated process for sure. If there's a way to automate some of this, like let's not write time cards. How do you make sure the time cards there? How do you record sales? When do you record sales? When does that piece get transferred to a sales comp calculator? When does it get moved to payroll? A lot of that should be and could be automated now. So there's a little bit involved in automating the process and putting and executing the sales comp plan together. Okay. Oh, I spoke a lot. I tend to not say so much, but tell me, leave a note in the chat. What's your biggest takeaway today? How are you gonna do this differently moving forward based on our discussion today? Anything?
In the meantime, Agnes, we do have a few questions.
Sure.
And some great commentary regarding their takeaways. So the biggest takeaway for Brian is that he needs to call you. Very good one.
Riplin will give you my number.
I sure will, Brian. No problem at all. We do have a few questions here, Agnes. If we could start off with, what are your thoughts on bonus structure versus commission structures? And also around payments yearly versus quarterly and biweekly.
So let me finish the first one. So bonus versus commission, right? You said?
Yes, that's right.
So I actually look at those as they're not mutually exclusive. You got to understand, right? So commission, if you look at a sales rep, let's talk a hunter first, because hunter is a bit more of like a lone wolf. So if you think about hunters, they, like I said, tend to be lone wolves. They like personal performance and they're going to excel. If they're a good hunter, they're going to excel on their own. So a lot of times when you look for hunters, I always look to have a pretty deep and comprehensive commission structure as part of their OTE, because they like to know that they're getting a dollar for every dollar you take in. Okay, so a commission piece is important, but like I said, it's not mutually exclusive to having a bonus piece. So depending on your sales culture, you might want this lone wolf that's doing very well on his own to play with play with the ops team. You also want this person to play with maybe the account management team, right? So if you want to make sure there's an element, the behavior I'm trying to get them to exhibit is play well with others, right? If I want them to play well with others, and I have to incentivize them to play well with others. And sometimes I use bonus as a way to get that done, right? So if the team achieves this, then you get this bonus. So there's a team bonus, there's an individual bonus, and there could be a commission structure as well. So there, like that's a a long way of saying that it isn't mutually exclusive. It depends on your particular environment and the behavior you want to exhibit. Riblin, what was the second question?
Yeah, Chris kind of had a follow-up question to that. So what are your thoughts around payments that are yearly versus quarterly versus biweekly?
Yearly, quarterly, and biweekly. Okay. Um, I'm trying to get clients, but this is a personal thing, so it's not a best practice thing. I'm trying to get people to stay away from paying biweekly, okay, unless it's a full commission structure. And you're talking about the livelihood of people sort of paying their rent, right? So completely separate conversation. But if it is just a commission piece on top of a base piece that allows people to live, then I'm trying to get people away from doing biweekly payment, because every time we do a payout, I'm now tasking the payroll team so first of all, I'm tasking my sales management team to come up with numbers and verify numbers, and I'm tasking my payroll team to administer the payout. So I'm trying to get them away from doing biweekly just because I want to optimize the overall effectiveness of the administrative piece. So I'm leaning toward doing quarterly payout for a lot of these, just so that I can minimize it from a workload standpoint. But like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. A lot of it has to do with your internal org structure and how you guys do your payroll and your bonuses and all that lumped in.
Thank you, Agnes. Our next one here is from Shelley. So what sources can be used to benchmark the commission percentage that sales teams should be getting?
So I would start off by benchmarking the industry standard of OTE in the first place in your industry. And you should be able to either buy that data of the DNBs of the world, or I think, what's the local one that we're talking about? They're the database that you can buy for sure, in terms of the industry standard, even down to the city that you're in terms of OTE. Then I want you to work backwards to divide up the OTE into base, commission, bonus, product incentive, all that. I want you to go and, like I mentioned earlier, what kind of behavior are you exhibiting, right? How much of the sale close is within that person's control, and then start playing around with how much of that should be base, how much of that should be commission, like incentives, and come up with something that uh, uh, I guess matches industry standard, but still allows you to have a person. Like, I always believe that there's a personality. Unless you're willing to pay 20% over your competitor, there's something that you have that someone else doesn't have and want to work for you rather than someone else. So you want to make sure that you flag that as part of your incentive structure. But you should be able to get, in terms of OTE, you can buy that off. I think salary. Oh, I'll get back to you. There are some sites that you can buy the OTE off, but also the easiest way I can tell you is just ask the rep in your industry, and see where they're at in terms of their compensation structure. Most of them would tell you. They might bump up 10% based on their current salary, but it's a pretty good indication as to how they're getting paid.
Thanks so much, Agnes. We have a question here. What are some examples on how to incentivize roles like hunter versus farmer?
Hunter versus farmer. And this is a bigger discussion. But if you think about, let's say hunter, right? If you look at hunter, which we're talking about business development people, we're talking about people that going out, shaking hands, meeting people, meeting hundreds and thousands of people in the pre-COVID day. But now, somehow on LinkedIn or through networking, they're meeting people like this, right? Hundreds at a time. So they put themselves out there, right? Now draw on the person, and organization need this person to be able to put themselves out there. So draw a personality type. There's a lot of good sales personality tests too to see if they're fit for that role too. And understanding this type and see how they want to be compensated. And like I said, I mean, I pointed out that they might be lone wolf, and sometimes they are. I'm not saying that it's not one size fit all, right? But then you go back to thinking about, okay, how would this person maximize their revenue, like the revenue that they're bringing in? How can I get this person to shake more hands, right? How do I compensate them in a way that allows them to get up in the morning, right? Very different than an account manager. If you think about the farmers, because the farmers is all about building relationship to the next level, right? If you buy $100,000 from me this year, I want you to buy $250,000 from me the following year. How can I become your best friend? And that type of behavior requires somebody that wants to build a relationship. Like they're so different. Like they're so fascinating. My hunters, I have some in-house do it, and they're funny. If you look at it, my hunters can't even remember who they shook hands with last year. Maybe they bring in a good deal last year, completely don't remember that guy's name because they've already moved on to the next thing, right? Versus my account manager, they're constantly talking about the children. They're talking about they're talking about their birthdays, going to people's birthday parties, and now Maddie is 5 years old, and all about that building of a relationship. Completely different personality type as well. So when you look at the way that you incentivize them, right back to what I was saying, the behavior, what goal do we have as an organization first of all, but then what kind of behavior am I trying to get these people to exhibit? And based on this, what I want them to exhibit, then I'm going to tell them. So maybe this year, I'm doing a plan. If I'm doing the hunter side, for example, maybe every year, so not the top 30 or top 40 accounts, they're only growing by 10%. I might come in and say, you know what, growing 10% after doing data analysis, I realized growing 10% isn't good enough. So maybe the industry standard right now, because it's booming in certain sector, it should be growing by 25%, maybe by 50%. Maybe they only get compensated, not only get, maybe they get an accelerator if their account is at 25 or 50% instead of 10% growth, 20% growth. And then you're trying to get them to exhibit the behavior that you want them to do by, I don't care if you're running spiff, you're running incentive trips, or you just doing a compensation or comp plan and doing accelerator on the various different milestone within an account growth. But that's why I said I want to leave a bit more time for Q&A, because each comp plan is unique to your organization's growth path. So it's good conversation.
I agree, Agnes. We have a few more questions. This is a very lively Q&A. Some salespeople just want it all: awards, rewards, bonus, games. How do you pick the right ones? That's a good question, John.
It's a great question. It is true. It is true. But on top of looking at, I think first of all, you look at personality. You cannot come up with a plan for everybody. I told you, right? You can come up with a plan for every role. So it is going to be activity based. You don't have to give them all, right? Because sure, the award is important. The reward is important as well. But you want to pull I mean, like your kid, right? I want to play soccer. I want to play hockey. I want to swim. I want to do figure skating, right? I want to play video game. That's the most important. They want it all too. But how do you pick and choose a right path for them? It's the same idea as your sales rep. So make sure you don't give them everything though, because I can tell you not each lever is as effective. So you got to look at which is the effective lever for behavior change. Good question.
And very sound advice. Thanks, Agnes. This is a good one. What are your thoughts on a guaranteed uncapped commission from starting from $0 in sales compared to a minimum sales target with a cap structure? Mamma mia.
Mm-hmm. I think this is not best practice because there's no best practice around cap versus no cap. Um, I can share with you more as a sales rep for me personally. Um, I don't like a cap. And I know there's reasons why there are caps, so I'm not here to explain to debate whether cap is good or bad. But as a sales rep, I just think, why are you like when I pick an organization to be at, right? I want myself to be successful, and if you know that you're a good rep, you're going to be you're going to want to make the most money possible based on your skills and your books, right? So if I hear the organization is giving me a cap, I would be wary about joining that organization in the first place because I'm like, why? Why can't? Why are you capping me? So, um, so this is less to do with best practice, more has to do with how I feel about the way that my company. I mean, it could be very personal too, right? But how my company is rewarding me for the hard work that I put in and day out. Are you telling me that I should cap my effort? In terms of bringing in sales. I'm hoping is not. So going back, look at your cap, see if it's necessary. Because in some organization, I do agree with cap. So when you look at the cap, look at it is executed wisely to what the organization needs from this group of individual in this role, and then see if its cap is needed. Great question, actually.
Thanks, Agnes. I think we maybe have time for one or two more questions, if you don't mind, Agnes.
Cool.
We have here, and you touched on it earlier, what are your thoughts on team bonus and slash commission plan versus individual plans?
Mm. Um, it's going to come down to culture. So the easy way of doing it, I mean, we talk about overly complex sales comp structure. So the easy way to do it, of course, is keeping it base plus commission, right? Then sort of you give the salespeople what they need in terms of gaining a dollar for a dollar, and then you look at providing the livelihood for the family, right? While they're ramping up. So there's the base plus bonus, base plus commission. But when I leverage bonus, it really comes down to the culture with the organization and what everyone else is getting out. Like I was talking to you guys about, we were doing a sales plan for an engineering consulting firm, and we spoke to, well, when does the project management team get paid up, right? What is their bonus structure like? Well, if they get paid team bonus and my sales rep sort of work with them on sales, what does that look like? Well, if now they're also helping to sell as well, should they get compensated on commission? But it's a little convoluted because then how do I track new sales versus upsell? Well, if they're getting paid a team bonus for hitting team targets, well, my salespeople help them sell that too. Should they get a team bonus? So much of the idea of using commission plus team have everything to do with, for me, the culture with the organization and what type of behavior I'm trying to get them to exhibit as a team. So a lot of times I try to leverage that. But there's also clients that I work with where they don't believe in commission at all because they don't want the headache of executing commission. So they do a quarterly individual bonus, and then we set out KPIs for hitting the individual bonus and the payout for that. And then there is a team bonus associated with hitting team target as well. So much to talk about in terms of incentivizing people's behaviors.
Thanks, Agnes. We still have quite a few questions, but what I'll do is I will hyperlink to Agnes's LinkedIn when I send out the recording. Agnes, is that okay? Just to let people get in touch with you and Change Connect? Awesome.
Yeah, and then next week, actually, there's I think there's only 3 Agnes Land in the world apparently on LinkedIn world. So you're gonna be able to find me for sure. So add me on LinkedIn for sure. I'm an open book when it comes to that. And when Riplin give me the your emails later on, I think today or tomorrow, then I'll send out an email to do a customer satisfaction survey anyways in terms of giving me feedback on today's webinar and whether it was useful for you. So you have my contact information from there.
Amazing. So I just want to thank everybody who's joined today's webinar. We've got such fantastic feedback, Agnes, that I'm sure you can see in the questions there and the comments there. Thank you so much to everybody who's attended today. And of course, Agnes, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. Here at the CPSA, it's really my goal to bring the sales community with as much topical content, just like webinars and presentations like this. Our accredited partner insights are really top tier, as you can see. And Change Connect's latest article is in our Learning Hub. It is called The Top 4 Results on Poor Staff Onboarding, which is another great and topical piece of content that we have for you. If you haven't already, please make sure that you head on over to the Learning Hub and make use of this fantastic resource that Agnes has gratefully sent us over. If you'd like to register for any of our other webinars, please feel free to head on over to cpsa.com/calendar, where you'll find all of our other virtual events listed there. Our next public webinar in partnership with RICO is going to be on March 2nd, and this one will be on making your sales presentation memorable in a virtual workplace. And after that, we are going to have Agnes again on our International Women's Day webinar on March 7th. So please feel free to have a look at our virtual events and sign up and register for all of our great content on the go. Thank you so much, everybody. And again, thank you so much, Agnes. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone.